The Beach Boys 2020. I'm laughing because what a fucking, excuse me, crazy album this is. This is most likely going to be my longest album review of all time. I love this album. I adore it so much. It's probably the craziest album the Beach Boys ever put out, and they have a bunch of crazy albums. Not maybe in terms of musically, I mean there are some songs with very interesting production techniques used over here, but just the story of it, the story behind each of the songs, there are so many weird coincidences surrounding this album, and considering all those coincidences surrounding this album, to me it's crazy that 2020 hasn't become a cult classic of sorts. Not even within the Beach Boys fandom. It's kind of talked about as this subpar, mediocre filler album that they put out to please Capitol Records because their record contract was ending and they had to put out something. And while that might be true, I don't think that the material in the album itself is subpar in any way. So let's dive straight into it. The album that they put out before this was Friends, at that point, the last album that Brian Wilson had a huge impact on. You know, he worked so much with that album, and that whole story that after Pet Sounds and after Shelving of Smile, Brian withdrew isn't true. He worked hard on Smiley Smile, Wild Honey and Friends. But 2020 is the first one that he kind of just took a step backwards. Actually, he went into psychiatric hospital even, so he got treatment, and you know, he had a lot of things going on. So as you can see, he's not even on the cover art, which is crazy to me, and that's just one of the crazy things about this album. Not having sort of your leader of the group in the album cover. It's so weird. Well, anyhow, let's talk more about the cover art in a minute. This starts a whole period in the Beach Boys saga where the dynamics change a lot. So instead of Brian leading the group now in the studio, you have basically Carl doing a lot of the stuff that Brian used to do. And also Dennis starts to blossom as a songwriter, and here you have multiple songs by him which are all highlights of the album. Sure, there are a few leftover tracks and a few tracks, you know, that Brian worked on during this time period for the sessions as well, but he's pretty absent nonetheless. But before we dive into the song selection in itself, I want to say a few words of the cover art. While I actually love the album cover as a standalone thing, I cannot get over the fact that it needs some Brian Wilson. I know he's over here. Let me do this sophistically. I know he's over here. And this is, by the way, the first gatefold release that they put out, even though it's not a double LP or anything like that, but for some weird reason they wanted to include Brian with the, I think it's like called eye chart or whatever, you know, eye testing site, testing chart, whatever, you know, in English, this thing. And it's a creepy inner gatefold. I really just don't understand the idea of it. I know that it's supposed to be the 20th Beach Boys album, that's why the name. And somebody, probably Mike or something, came because he's a title guy, obviously. Somebody came up with the idea that let's call it 2020 and include, because it's I guess it's a term in English that you describe a good site. I guess it's not used in here, so I'm not sure. But you know, it took me years to find out what the title meant. It's a weird album title, and this whole thing is just so freaking weird, and it's like made with the first beta version of Photoshop or something. It's just, yeah, and the whole dark theme with the cover itself and the inner gatefold is so. You might as well put Charles Manson over here. Like, it's so freaking weird. I don't know. That's why I love it, because of that. But I just wish that there was, like, Brian would be here. And, you know, I like the picture. I think it's a cool picture. Ali is cool over there. Everybody has, you know, semi-cool clothing. I dig it. They are in the cover, in the photos. That's great. That's a big thumbs up. And I dig the black style and everything. Like, back cover too is great. I like it, but it does look a lot like a compilation album, which it in a way is, but yeah, I mean, the title of the album and the cover art is a bit lackluster. I personally like it because it's weird, but it's not really something that would interest people in any way. And it's so weird to not have Brian on there. So yeah, missed opportunity once again by the Beach Boys. The album was released in February of '69, so there was a good about a half a year gap between Friends and the release of this one. The album includes a smash hit with Do It Again, which was released just, I think, just a few weeks after, maybe a month or two after the release and the flop of Friends. And against all odds, it became a huge hit for them. I mean, it's a great song. It's probably the best album opener for the guys. I think maybe with Sail on Sailor, it's just a perfect song, and it's the first time that they started to take a nostalgic look at things. You know, it had been 4 or 5 years since they last time did a summer tune, you know, relatively short period of time, but during that time, and they were still young men, so 5 years around that age seems like a era, you know, it seems just a huge time, you know, going by. And you know, I can understand that, but it feels, looking back from here, it feels kind of strange how you know, things that happened so little time ago actually felt nostalgic already, and that they actually pulled that off. That actually became a huge hit. It's crazy, but that song is just perfect. It's a Brian Wilson Mycliffe composition, lyrics, but it's not a traditional Brian Wilson tune composition wise. It's relatively simple. There's that middle part that gets interesting, but otherwise it's just basically like a 3-chord, pretty simple rock tune. What really makes it are the great lead vocals by Mike, great lyrics, and the drum sound of the track, not just the intro, which is probably the best part of it. And it bugs me so much that the drum intro part is not considered one of the all-time classic rock drum intros, because it's just so freaking amazing. It's so recognizable, and it should be up there. Stephen Desper created that sound. The engineer of this era, he worked a lot, did a lot of great stuff with the boys in the late 60s and early 70s. And he created that drum sound with machinery work. You know, these days that will be very simple to create on Pro Tools or, you know, whatever software. But yeah, I mean, that was just unheard of. It catches your ear immediately, and it's so hard rocking, and I just love the track. It's, I don't know, it's just so freaking great. I love it, and it's a perfect way to start off this album. Do It Again is then followed with I Can Hear Music, which is a Carl Wilson production and lead vocal, one of his finest, and I think this is the version of I Can Hear Music, the definite version of the song. It's just the best one out there. It's a classic song. They really made it their own, and it's a Phil Spector written tune with I don't remember, but with a few co-writers as well. But one of the first weird coincidences with this album, it's only the first one of the 3 songs on the album that were written or co-written by a convicted murderer. So weird stuff, but it's a great song, classic song. That a cappella part is my favorite, with Mike's bass vocals. Great song, and could have been an album opener as well. But anyway, it's the killer way to open an album with songs like these. Bluebirds Over the Mountain is then the 3rd track, which is once again a cover song. I really dig it. I love the soaring guitars. It's a rocking tune, always loved it. composition-wise, not the strongest. You know, Beach Boys were able to write stronger songs by themselves, so it really kind of makes me wonder why they included this on the album. But you know, I love the song. I always loved it. Have no issue with it. I think it's placed really well over here. The album really starts off very hard rocking with this rocking sound, and I think especially side one of the album over here is probably the hardest rocking that the Beach Boys ever got. You know, that you got so many great rockers over here. Maybe side one of Today would be another one, but it has a little bit different sound. This is more like in the style of the late 60s, 70s rock with heavy guitars. So I love that. It's a different sound for the boys, and it really works really greatly. Be With Me is the first Dennis Wilson track, 4th track of the album. A classic song, classic Dennis Wilson production. It's a mood piece. Like I like to say this phrase a lot with Dennis music, but his stuff is very cinematic. Be With Me is a great example of that. It has this sort of kind of like Phil Spector type of wall of sound thing, this bombastic soundscape really happening, but in a very interesting, unique way. It's not like a ripoff of Phil's style. It's very different, but it has a similar effect, I think. And the lyrics, the melody, I love that part where, you know, the drums on this track are amazing, and I love that part where it goes like, she should be with me, like that, where it kind of steps down a little bit and more silent, you know, and just that whole melody and that whole structure of the song, it's amazing. It's just a perfect song. I love it. I love it so much. And it's a very eerie tune. Fits the mood of the you know, the dark cover and the you know, other dark aspects of the album too. Then it's followed with All I Want to Do, probably the hardest rocking track that the Beach Boys ever put out. Great punk rock lead vocals by Mike. I love this track. It's written by Dennis, and I believe Stephen Kalinich as well. And Dennis tried first to do the lead vocals. You can hear them on the 2020 sessions that were released digitally. And if somebody in the Beach Boys management team is watching this right now, please put out the sessions as a physical copy. Also, because I'm gonna buy it at least twice if you release it. So please put it out. And I believe they weren't put out 5 years ago, because the same time they were putting out the symphonic Phil symphonic whatever, you know, rip-off cash grab thing with the Beach Boys, I didn't get it. I'm not gonna buy that. But put out the 2020 sessions and Friends sessions, please. I'm gonna buy them, and I'm sure there are other people, other fans of the Beach Boys as well, who did the same decision and didn't get that one. But anyway, this is not about that release, but you know, just a little notation for the management over here. But anyway, like, the sessions of this album and this era include so much highlights. But anyway, I'm glad that Mike did the lead vocals on the album, you know, the released version, because he just really nails them. Who would have thought that he can really pull off that sort of hard rocking vocals with... He just really nails them, and I really wish that he would have done more of that. It doesn't sound hoaxy at all. It sounds genuine and pure, and just pure rock and roll. I love that. And the track itself ends with sex sounds, probably the first recorded celebrity sex tape ever. So, you know, the Beach Boys made it for that one first as well. And that's one of the weird things about this album, and I wonder why that isn't talked, you know, anyway. You know, like I think it's just a weird thing, and I love it because it's not just a random thing. Artistically, it actually fits the song. So I don't know. I just think it works really well, and I love it how it's hidden there. And you know, Beatles were doing, I wouldn't say similar things, but kind of, you know, things like this around the same time period. You know, putting things in the song, leaving a little snippets of cuss words or stuff like that. You know, but nothing this extreme. This is pretty extreme. So, you know, I love it. It's a great song, one of my favorite Beach Boys tunes. Side 1 then ends with The Nearest Faraway Place, which is an piano instrumental by Bruce Johnston. And as much as I like the song, it would fit perfectly on a movie score, it just has no place on the album, especially on side 1, which is a rocking side. It has great rocking feeling, and then it ends after All I Want to Do with this sort of, it's not elevator music, because the melody is very memorable. I really like the tune, but you know, it's just one of the weird quirkinesses of this album. It almost makes you laugh when you hear those first notes after the sex sounds. You know, it's just so weird, that transition, and it just makes me wonder why they included it on side 1. You know, put it on side 2 or swap it to some other tune, because they recorded a lot of great tracks in these sessions. Well, you know, I like the song, but just the placement is a little bit weird. Side 2 opens up then with Cotton Fields, which is the second song on the album, written by a convicted killer, you know, or whatever, Lead Belly. It's a classic country blues song, produced here by Brian. It was Al Jardine's idea. He brought it up and sings the lead vocals on it. I prefer the album version over here over the single one that Al then later went on and produced himself. The single version is more simpler, cleaner, doesn't have so much reverb, doesn't have so much mood either, in my opinion, and it has this weird clicking tape era thing going on. It's like a sound, this high-pitched sound going on in it, and I don't really like it that much. I think most people probably prefer the single version, because I think it was a minor hit, especially on Europe, so people are maybe a bit more familiar with it. And it's not a bad version, but I prefer the album version because it's more moodier. I dig that intro part with that huge reverb, and yeah, I really like the tune. It's a great song. Creedence also covered it, I think probably a bit later. Not really sure about the timeline. It's a good version as well, but Creedence did better songs themselves, and I think the Beach Boys version is greater. I Want to Sleep is a very Friends-esque track by Brian. I love that flute, I think, going on it. The whole song is so moody, lyrically very simple, just about sitting on a park bench and watching the sprinklers going on, and it is so relaxing, melancholic in a way, but also very calming, soothing. Could as well be on Friends, so you know, that goes without saying that I really love the song. It's one of the highlights on the album. Just pure genius, and this is a very underrated tune. You know, I gotta mention that, because probably never was performed live. I don't think so, and you know, you never hear anybody talking about it. But it's a great song, amazing track, and I feel it's an issue with a lot of the tracks on the album, excluding Do It Again. That the whole Manson thing, and the fact that this was the last album on Capitol for them, just kind of put this huge shadow on the music itself on it, that a lot of these songs have kind of been forgotten, and it's a shame, because there's really not a single stinger over here. Quite the opposite. I Want to Sleep is then followed with Time to Get Alone, which is another Brian Wilson classic track. Amazing vocals, amazing production. You can hear that he worked hard on it, and he didn't first intend it for the Beach Boys, and there was, I believe, some sort of drama considering the song and the fact that Brian was working on it for another group, which then later became Three Dog Night. But anyhow, I love the song. I mentioned this, I believe, it was either the Wild Honey review or Friends review. Well, it was the Wild Honey review. I was talking about Let the Wind Blow, and the way that the Beach Boys even though they are a group from Los Angeles, for some reason they were able to create some of my favorite winter and sort of northern landscape songs with lyrics about snow or Christmas and winter. And Time to Get Alone is probably the crowning achievement of those songs. Usually Brian really liked to write that sort of things, like Let the Wind Blow, his Christmas songs, and this one over here, and Country Air, there's a bunch of them. So anyway, I love the lyrics, pine scented air, and that whole scenery within the song. It's so heartfelt. It reminds me of, like, a lot of the scenery in the song reminds me of my life, my childhood memories at the cabin, and those pine trees and snow and topanga, what's that word? Topagan. It's a weird word. We call it pulkka. It's a lot easier for me. But anyway, I love that song. It's a very, just warms your soul. It's a great song. It's not a rock and roll track. It's not really a traditional ballad. I'm not really sure what it is, but it's a classic Brian Wilson tune. And there's but the best part of the song is that deep and wide thing, that with the huge reverb, that it's perfect. It is just a production masterpiece and songwriting masterpiece. I love it. It's then followed with the fourth track of side 2, Never Learn Not to Love, which is a Dennis Wilson tune, but was originally a song called Cease to Exist by Charles Manson. And you know the story, so I'm not gonna go into that over here, but Manson and Dennis were working with music, during this time period, and Manson recorded some stuff at Brian's home studio as well. I really actually wish that those tapes would be released someday, because I think I haven't listened to Manson's music that much, but the stuff that I've heard and Never Learn Not to Love, I think it's a great song, and I think he had musical talent, And I don't want to go into that, that other stuff. I don't like, I'm just gonna say this, if we can enjoy Cotton Fields, we can enjoy Never Learn Not to Love as well, So as Phil Spector's work, there's just a bunch of, you separate the creator of the creation, if you can do that, you can enjoy these things, and the recordings happened. Never Learn Not to Love is on the album. It's over here. It happened. So, I'm gonna talk about it, and I'm gonna be honest about it. I love the song, and I think Dennis really made it better. It doesn't really sound anything like Charlie's original version, and they wouldn't have included it here if they knew what would happen a little time after the release of this album. So, how could they have known? So, but I love the song. As I mentioned, it's very eerie, the intro of it, and it's bouncy. It's Dennis really made it his own. I really like it, and his lead vocals are great. I really dig the live performance. I don't remember which show that was on, but he did perform it live at least once in a TV setting. That's cool to see. Then the album ends with 2 Smile leftovers, so to speak, Our Prayer and Cabin Essence, and this is a mixed bag for a lot of people. Personally, I think from historical point of view, them being included at the end of this album helped a bunch for Smile becoming as what's the word, mythical, I think, Cabin Essence especially being one of the highlights of Smile. It being at the end of this album, even though not a lot of people heard the album, but the people that did and learned about Our Prayer and Cabin Essence, I'm not sure at which point it was on public knowledge that they are Smile material. but I'd imagine that it wasn't a secret. So I bet that it had a huge factor in creating that smile myth, so to speak. And what can you really say about those tracks? Our Prayer, just a perfect hymn, would work great as an album opener, and I kind of wonder why they didn't put it at spot 1, because Do It Again would work perfectly after it. But you know, it's a otherworldly piece, and Cabin Essence is very different than Our Prayer. Great production. I mean, Cabin Essence is it's a very complicated song, and lyrically, and also the structure of it is very interesting. You got that crazy bass, fuzz bass in it, and you have those buried vocals by Dennis, truck driving man, whatever, you know, that part. The tag of the song, one of the great song endings of all time. So, you know, it works perfectly as an album closer over here. But yeah, I mean, this whole album just is a great listen through and throughout. And it doesn't leave a bad taste in your mouth, you know. It doesn't fall apart. The only song that I feel is a little bit misplaced is The Nearest Faraway Place. But the song material is extremely strong from start to finish. There's no filler, even though the album was compiled with different, like, oh, Brian can't be involved now, okay, let's just take a few smile tracks at the end of it, like, you know, oh, Dennis, have you worked anything? Okay, you have those songs, let's take them. And you know, oh, we're still missing a few tracks, and you know, Mike wasn't really up to writing songs, you know, by himself at this point yet, so he was probably like, okay, I don't have any songs, so let's do a few covers. And you know, like, there's no great mission behind the album. Let's do a some sort of concept album, nothing like that. It's kind of like a compilation album of new stuff, but that's how most of the albums are made, you know. But I guess just being followed, if you think about it in a historical point of view, you first get Pet Sounds, then you get the so to speak lo-fi trilogy, which is, even though it was lackluster in terms of sales, it was artistically cohesive, and all those albums are artistic statements. But then you got 2020, which is filled with great songs, but it's not an artistic statement in any way, you know, as a album, really. It's not a concept album or anything like that. And then you got the fact that it wasn't probably marketed as well as it could have been. You don't have Brian on the cover, and you know, the guys have changed, they look different, so a lot of people probably, if they saw this at the store, they probably wouldn't even recognize them. So you know, there's all kinds of factors. And then there was this Charlie Manson thing, which left a bad taste, I guess, about the album for a lot of people. But I love it. I always dug it. And when I first got into the Beach Boys, I thought that it was one of their strongest albums, and it felt so weird that so many people hated it. But you know, people have different opinions. I always loved it, and would probably put it in my top 10 all-time Beach Boys albums. Could be even on a spot like 6 or 7, because I think it's very strong, actually. What do you think about it? Write down a comment and let's continue discussions over there. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Bye bye.